This week, we're going to explore typography, and we want to think about typography as one of the most fundamental elements of graphic design. And this is our bridge between the visual and the written. This is from the books we read to the apps we use. Type is going to shape the way we perceive and process our information. But what exactly is typography, and why does it matter so much in our design? So at its core, type is the art and technique of arranging type in a way that we make the written language more legible, readable, and also visually appealing. And this is beyond just choosing a font. This is the size, the spacing, the alignment, the hierarchy, everything that works together to create meaning and enhance the communication. What is type versus typeface versus font? And this is one of those things we just need to clarify because these terms are often confused and also interchangeable. So the type is the design of the letter forms or the character that make up the written language. The typeface, this is the specific design type. This is the Times New Roman, the Comic Sans, the Helvetica, the papyrus. This is the set of characters, the letters, the numbers, and the symbols that you're going to use. The font, this is the size, the weight, and the style of the typeface. So, you're going to use Times New Roman bold at 12 point. Today, we're going to see font and typeface used interchangeably, and I'm okay with that because the two do now sort of work the same. And we're going to think of this, and we know I love my musical sort of parallels. This is a music composition. Typeface is the music composition. The font is the specific performance of that composition. So why does type matter in graphic design? It's not just about making the text look good. It's about making that connection between the message that the client wants and that the audience is going to receive. And we are going to use this to convey mood. We're going to establish our hierarchy, and we're also going to guide the reader's eye. And as we can see, if we shift to something like papyrus, if we choose the wrong typeface or we're just using it ineffectively, this is going to disrupt the connection between what your message is and what the viewer is sort of creating as their output. It's going to confuse them. So make sure that you choose the typeface accordingly. So if you have a legal document, you might not want to set it in Comic Sans. Or maybe you don't want to use Courier for a wedding invitation. Whatever type you're choosing is going to enhance that intended tone. It's also going to ensure that the message is going to be received as you and the client have planned. And how does this influence our everyday life? What's everywhere? Type is everywhere that we're looking, whether we're paying attention to it or not. It's in our books, our magazines, our newspapers, the websites we look at, the apps we use, signs, billboards, anything in the public graphics like posters. It's also in our branding and advertising. This is our Coca-Cola or our Google. It's everywhere, whether or not we are paying attention to it or not. And in our course modules, you'll see the article. It's a study on the crystal goblet. Type should be like a crystal goblet. You're not paying attention to the goblet itself. You're paying attention to what's inside that. What's the drink? So I do recommend that you read that to sort of get an overview on the sort of invisibility concept of type. What we want to think about with type, we want to think about the selection itself. So what is its purpose and its audience, and is it going to connect to them? The hierarchy. This is so important because we want to use the size, weight, and style to emphasize, what's the most important thing on the page, and then the next, and then the next. It sort of helps us flow through that composition. The alignment. How are we arranging the type so that it feels balanced and intentional? This is our left aligned, center justified, right aligned, etc. And then for the spacing, this is the fine-tuning aspect. It could be the space between the letters, the kerning, or it could be the space between the lines, the leading, and also what blocks of type and text you have on your page. We have our typeface selection, we have our hierarchy, we have our alignments and our spacing. This is how we want to classify things for whenever we're working with type. Serif. So the serif is the one we're going to talk about first. And these are the ones, and if we look on the screen, they have the little feet on them, little feet and little phalanges coming off of them. So these are those small decorative strokes, the serifs, at the ends of the letter forms. And this is just going to add a sense of formality and tradition to the text. And we've already seen the sort of historic background and structure of this and we saw it in the column of Trajan. And these inscriptions used during Roman times are using serifs when they're carving the letters into stone. And this also helps add to the readability of it. These typefaces are also going to continue to evolve and, be expanded upon in the Renaissance. We're going to see this in the Roman, the Giraldi serif type styles. So again, this is helping with readability. So if you have something long form like a book, a magazine, a newspaper, you're going to want it to be easily digestible. And so a serif is going to help give your eye those little pause points that you need so you don't get eye fatigue. It's also going to have this sort of sense of tradition, professionalism, and authority whenever you're using it. And so this is great for something like a novel or a book or academic papers or some sort of corporate documents. The sans serif does not have a serif, so it just means without the serif. And this is going to have a clean and modern style to that letter form. And we're going to see these in the 19th century, and it's going to be really popular with the modernist designers in the early 20th century. And that's like our Swiss and international type style in particular, because they want it to be efficient and essential, and they wanted them, the typefaces themselves to be simple and functional. We're going to see, it's really minimal. It's really modern. And this is actually really easy to read in digital format. And it's great for headlines, websites, apps, corporate branding like this FedEx. It's just going to have a really nice, clean, and efficient feel to it. The slab serif, and you'll also hear this referred to as the Egyptian serif, these are a little bit blockier. You're going to have a bold industrial variation of that serif. And this is going to be really popular in the Industrial Revolution. And these are traditionally used for advertising and poster design. They're going to be bold and sturdy. And what's interesting with this is it's going to take the traditional feel, but it's going to make it feel a little bit more modern. And this is great, like we said, for posters, for advertisements, or designs that need to make a strong visual impact. The display typefaces are larger. So if you have something that's going to be like a headline or an emphasis point, or you want something to jump out and catch attention, you're probably going to use a display type because it's going to be, a little bit more exaggerated, or it's going to have a little bit more of a decorative element to it. And these are going to be popular in the 19th century, and it's driven by the need for eye-catching advertising and signage. We want to capture your attention, and it's going to sort of break out of the plane of viewing at the viewer and catch their eye. The key characteristics with this, they're going to be highly decorative and stylized. They're great for large-scale use, but they're going to be a little bit limited in the readability. So we wouldn't want to use them in paragraph format. So this is for the headlines, the posters, the branding that needs to grab attention. Our monospace types, all the characters are going to take up the same amount of horizontal space. It's going to feel really uniform. And these are our typewriters. This is where this is sort of developing from, where our spacing is going to ensure consistent alignment. It's functional. It's utilitarian. It's going to feel a little bit more retro, and it's going to have that mechanical vibe to it. This is great for coding, technical documents, and designs that require precise alignment. Our scripts, they're a little bit more fun. They have a little bit more flow to them. They're mimicking cursive handwriting. And this ranges from the formal calligraphy to, again, the casual handwriting styles. And these are inspired by the calligraphic traditions, and they're going to have gained popularity in the 18th and 19th centuries. And we're seeing them even today developed even further with designers like Jessica Hische, like in this post and in the next one. These are formal. They're also casual. They can sort of bounce between the two depending on the situation and the tone of the piece. They are a little bit harder to read in large text blocks, so I would avoid them for paragraphs. They're good for headlines. And again, this is great for invitations, logo, packaging, poster, headlines, or in this case, the book cover design, something that needs to sort of stand out from the crowd. and then flow you into the next part of your design. All right, so how do we pair all of this? So we want to create a little bit of balance and contrast, but we don't want the pieces to clash. So when you pair a typeface, it's going to allow you to create a sense of hierarchy. You're going to be able to distinguish between the headers, subheaders, and the paragraphs. It's going to help you set the tone, mood, and style of the piece, and it's also going to help maintain interest for the viewer, because if you have a little bit of a balance between the design typefaces, it's going to stop your piece from being and feeling monotonous. So, what does this look like? So if we were on website design, it could be this, sans serif bold header, but then you have a really clean serif body text. And then this is going to make it a little bit more legible while making it engaging to look at. So it's going to catch your attention with the headline, and then it's going to flow you through the info, through the paragraph. And what we want to think about is the contrast. We want contrast where the font pairs are visually distinct, to avoid that mismatched or overly similar look. And again, a nice combo with this is what we just saw, a sans serif for the header and a nice serif for the body text. You want to make sure the personalities talk to each other so that they have a sort of complementary tone. So something like a Baskerville, is going to look good with a Futura because, their personalities are distinct, but they're not contradictory. We also want to think about the weight, style, and spacing in between all of this. We want the headline to grab the attention, and we want the body text to be able to be read over long stretches. Again, we want to avoid that eye fatigue when we're reading. And then stick to like 2 or 3 typefaces in a single design, because if you get more than 3, your design might feel a little bit chaotic or unprofessional. Now, there are times where it makes sense, and this is where I usually talk about people like David Carson who, might use 10, 15 different typefaces in a design. But that's sort of a visual aesthetic of his, and it works. But for the most part, you don't want to do that because it might feel a little bit all over the place. So 3 is typically a good number. All right. Now that we have some of the basics, let's take a look at our timeline. And we're going to start with the medieval times. So we have our script and calligraphy. And we saw the column of Trajan. We've already talked about that previously. So what happens next? Most of then Europe's intellectual activity is going to take place in monasteries. And this is where our monks are copying text by hand. And the one thing that's sort of interesting with this, we're used to, say today, going to a bookstore and buying any copy of a book that we want. But this is the era that you may at most have like 3 to 5 copies of these books. Everything's being done by hand, so it's going to be a slower process. The type and the calligraphic style that we're going to be looking at in this period are the Carolinian minuscule, and that's what we're seeing here on this page, and then the Gothic black letter script that we're going to be seeing in a moment. The Carolinian minuscule, you could still, this typeface in calligraphy you could still do today. Both of these you can. And what's interesting with this is, we're seeing this as a sort of revolution in legibility. We're going to have uniform letter height, we're going to have clearer spacing, and then you're going to have a little bit more rounder shape. So it's going to be a lot easier to read. And this is going to become the foundation for what we see as the modern Roman typefaces later down the line. But we're also dealing with the Gothic script, also known as black letter. And you're going to hear the two of those be interchangeable also. So if someone says Gothic or black letter, it's going to mean the same thing. Around the 12th century, black letter is replacing the Carolinian minuscule. And what's interesting with this is it's a little bit harder to read. It's really dense, it's angular, but it's a dramatic aesthetic of this era. It is highly decorative, but it is, as we can see in the image, a bit of a challenge to read whenever it's in long passages. So we're going to see things like the illuminated initials so that we can sort of see where that paragraph starts. And you might see some color shifts like here where it's a red in emphasis, so that, again, you sort of have areas where, if we were talking about it like from a hierarchical point of view, that's probably saying, sentence, paragraph return, so that we know where a new paragraph is. And the same thing with the initials. We sort of know where we're starting from. But then we get a little bit of jump in our timeline, and we get to the 15th century, And with Gutenberg, we have the concept of the movable type. And this, with the printing press, is going to make it possible to make books faster, and we're also going to be able to make them more efficiently than ever before. So unlike what we just saw, where, say, it's the monks in the monastery creating everything by hand, now you could typeset it with your movable type, and instead of having 2, 3, 5 copies, you could have 1, 2, 3, 500 copies of a pamphlet or a book or what have you. So this is great, because then this is going to help our ideas, be exchanged throughout different geographic locations. So with this era, he's going to take his typographic cues from the black letter. So what he's essentially doing is, he's making this movable type, but he's making it look like if it was actually handwritten at that time, which was the Gothic black letter. And this is a sample of what that type looks like. And so each of our movable types are going to have their letter or number on it. And then you're going to be able to put it in a case, pick and choose, and then arrange it for printing. And these are the cases. And this is just an interesting little side note. And you can see it says uppercase, lowercase. This is actually where we get that terminology from. The cases hold the type. And the bottom is the California job case, which has them combined. But it's also via, you can see on the left, which letters are used the most. So you can grab them more efficiently, akin to what we think of as a typewriter today. And what we can see is the uppercase and lowercase, the majuscules, the minuscules. So we take that terminology even today, the uppercases and the lowercases. The more well-known document printed at this time is the Gutenberg Bible. This is around the mid-1450s. And again, we're using that black letter type to mimic the handwritten at that time. And the combo of the movable type and the decoration of the type created a really seamless transition between the traditional and modern methods of production. And again, instead of having like 5 copies, now you can have 500 or more copies of something, so more people can own them. And again, ideas can be exchanged. In the late 15th century, typographers like Nicholas Jensen are going to explore and develop the Roman typefaces further, and these are the ones that were inspired by our classical inscriptions, like we saw with the Trajan's column. And Jensen's work, unlike what we saw with, Gutenberg's black letter, it's going to be a lot more lighter and open, and it's going to be a lot more easy to read. And this is what's going to set the stage for the Renaissance, where typography is explored even further. And in the Renaissance, we're going to take a more sort of scientific approach to this, the mathematical and scientific side of, what is the perfect proportion of a typeface or a letter. Jensen is going to create letters that are combining those calligraphic traditions, but it's going to have that humanist handwriting feel to it. So this is what's echoing from those, classic Roman era sort of monuments. And this is the Roman typeface that was cut in 1470 that we can see it then. And also now that has been digitized by Adobe. So you can see we're still using the same typeface created in 15th century Italy. How cool is that? So with the Renaissance and this sort of revival of the humanist side of design, we want to have a revival of the intellectual and the artistic. The type during this time is going to be, again, humanist and ideals, and it's going to emphasize clarity, proportion, and beauty. So Aldus, and if you are a design student, you've probably heard of Aldus Super Paint. This is, sort of an homage to that. And the italic type, and this is, to resemble the handwriting of the Renaissance scholars. We want it to feel like someone was actually writing it, even though it was being produced in a mechanical means. The italic fonts, which is interesting with that, is it's going to be more compact for printing. So it's going to make books more affordable and compact. So this is really cool, because then it's like the idea of the pocket book, the one that you could just put in your pocket and carry. And say you're traveling from Italy to Germany and you left this at the cafe, well, then that idea now can be exchanged in that era, and then everyone can read it. So it's a really great way to exchange ideas, the portability of our books. Garamond. Chances are you've used a Garamond typeface. These are Roman typefaces, and they were introduced in 1541. And again, we're refining the earlier designs, and we're starting to figure out, what are the proportions that feel good for reading and legibility, and also make things feel harmonious and balanced. And these become the gold standards for book typography, and that is even to today. We are still using Garamond for book layouts today, and as you can see, Adobe again went in and digitized it, so you can go in and use it for book designs today if you're creating that. Just a sample of that so that you can get an idea of what Garamond looks like. And then we get to the Industrial Revolution, and this is where those display typefaces come in handy. And we talked about them briefly at the beginning of this with the slab serif. The Industrial Revolution, this is around the 19th century. This is a period of rapid technological advancement and urbanization. Think mass production. Type needs to adapt in order to meet the needs of this new age. So it's going to be more bold. It's going to be more visible. We're going to use it for advertisement and public communication and design means. The slab serifs, and like we said, this is also known as the Egyptian typefaces. The slab serifs, they're really thick, they're blocky, and what's nice with these is they're designed to stand out in posters and advertisements. The go-to for this is the Clarendon, and this is going to be the synonymous typeface with the industrial age. And this is what that one looks like. Also, you can see it's a little bit more heavier, and those serifs, again, more block-like. And what's nice with this is it's going to really stand out. So, even though there's a lot of text on this page, you're getting the info across. It's the fair on the 30th of September. There's going to be fireworks, and here's the location for it. So we have that sense of hierarchy, and if you're walking, say, through your town square, it would jump out at you, catch your attention, and then you would have all of that information. So this is our key principles of advertisement designs. The fat faces evolve from that, and these are worked on by Robert Thorne, and these exaggerate the contrast between the thick and thin strokes, and this is going to be really eye-catching to whoever is walking by and reading this. And these are really popular in the Victorian era advertising. And just so that we can, again, get a little bit more of a glimpse of that, and some more. So again, it stands out. It's going to catch your attention. You're going to know to get your turnip seeds at that location. So it's really in your face and to the point, which is perfect for the Victorian advertisement sort of MO. All right, so why does this era matter as far as typography and its advancements go? So from the medieval through the industrial, we're going to lay the groundwork for whatever's going to be happening next in our modern design. We're going to shift from the handwriting to the movable type, and this is going to help revolutionize communication. It's going to help our ideas and innovations spread throughout the world, and it's also going to push type into the public sphere, which we haven't really seen before, and that's through advertising and poster-style displays. Each of these eras are adding to our design history, and it's going to create that foundation that we're going to see in our digital realm, where we can get a little bit more experimentation with whatever we're doing with our typefaces. So a lot of this type, like we said, has been digitized, and we are still working with it today. All right, modernism. Modernism through right now. And let's start with the modernist era. So in the 1900s, but the 20th century, the rise of modernism is going to bring a new approach to design, and it's going to emphasize the simplicity, functionality, and efficiency of communication. So it's going to remove the unnecessary ornamentation that we're going to see in, say, the Industrial Revolution through Victorian. And what we want with our type in this era is clean, it's geometric, and again, efficient would be the word. Futura, created by Paul Renner, 1927. Futura is epitomized by the ideal of form follows function, and it's inspired by the geometric shapes of the Bauhaus school. It's clean. The sans serif is really revolutionary in this period. And again, the emphasis is just going to be on the clarity. How efficient can you communicate your message? We're going to see it used for corporate logos, book covers, and even space travel, which I thought this was interesting and that you might enjoy this. It's actually used on a plaque in the Apollo 11 mission. So for the future, with Futura. All right, it's also used in various branding, and this is, when we're talking in the beginning about our typefaces and the families, we have, the thins, the extra thins, bolds, regulars, italics, and this is where you can really get a nice contrast, especially let's pick on the Calvin Klein at the top, like a regular or bold with a thin style. So it's great for branding also. Gill Sans, created by Eric Gill, 1928, and this is a little bit more of a humanist take on modernism. It's a little bit more round, it's a little bit more approachable, so, it's going to have the modern simplicity, but it's going to have a little bit more warmth and humanity to it. And this is the official typeface of the London Underground, and again, it's one of those hallmarks of our modern typography. You'll see it on BBC, Tag Heuer, and the story part of Toy Story. You'll also see it on the titles and authors of the Penguin books, and this series, which we will talk about in the book section, revolutionized the, small trade style books. And our friend Helvetica. Yes, we do talk about it a lot. Helvetica is designed in 1957 by Max Meininger, and it also had input from Eduard Hoffmann at the Haas foundry in Switzerland. And it was originally called Neue Haas Grotesk, and this felt, a little bit hefty, so it was simplified to Helvetica, the Latin name for Switzerland, because we wanted a neutral typeface. And this is it on the right. And Helvetica, we'll chat about it a bit because, of course, in design, it's talked about quite a bit. And this is sort of the epitome of the modernist design principles. It's simple, it's functional, it's universal. It's clean, neutral designs with the balanced proportions made it a really versatile typeface for a really wide range of applications. That's why we'll see it on branding, on signage, on posters, anything. Web, it's still, it's everywhere. And again, it was supposed to be neutral. It's supposed to not have its own personality. That way it could adapt to so many different contexts without overshadowing the content. And it was really clear. It was even spaced. It made it, again, easy to read, which is one of our goals. And it also had those modernist ideas. Helvetica reflected that principle in the Bauhaus of form follows function. And its emphasis is usability over ornamentation. All right, so we can see it here. This is Vignelli's subway branding, and it's great. This typeface is great for things like that. The corporations, governments, public signing. It's modern, it's clean. It's sort of that promise of a global standardized visual language, which is one of the things some designers are focused on with their work. You can see it in Vignelli's branding also with American Airlines and Knoll. And then, why does it matter? It's sort of an icon at this stage. Its success wasn't just about the design itself. It was about its timing. This is when global communication, branding, urban development were on the rise, and it's providing that cohesive solution to our visual needs. How do we make everything feel like it belongs together? How do we make it feel like, it's conveying the message without getting like a personality attached to it? And it's still used today. It's a powerful symbol for modernist typography, and we're still using it as we speak. So modernist type, why does this era matter? We're redefining the purpose of type. We're prioritizing clarity and universality. So typefaces like Futura and Gill Sans, these are our timeless staples, and they are still influencing contemporary design even today. But that brings us to the postmodern. So like we say, the pendulum is swinging from the clean and efficient to how do we become a little bit more human in tone and experimental. So the mid 20th century saw the emergence of postmodernism. And this is going to challenge those rigidities of modernism. We had the clean grids, the clean typefaces. But what happens if type becomes the playground for experimentation? What happens if we break traditional rules? And what happens when we explore new possibilities? The one we go to for this is David Carson. And David Carson is pretty much, his main focus is experimentation and seeing what can you do. What could I do to XYZ? He's revolutionary type use. We can see it on Raygun magazine. This is one of his more subdued ones, but there's on his website an archive of his covers so you can see it. And we're thinking of type as a visual element, not just a written communication tool. So what happens when type is image? So what he does, he layers his type, he distorts his type. What if, you print it out, take it outside, scratch it on the concrete, pour water on it, and then bring it back in and scan it? What happens if it's just slightly illegible? This is going to, in turn, spark some debate about the functionality of type. Does it have to be legible? What happens if you make it slightly illegible and then have to spend a little bit more time with it? But the really key thing with him is how he is inspiring new generations of designers to push boundaries. And just so that we can see some of his examples, like with his book cover. I mean, he was probably like, I don't need to have my name the whole way on there, so I'm just going to crop some of it out. So what happens if you do crop some of that out? And he also is in the surfing scene, so a lot of his pieces are based upon that genre. Emigre Fonts started in 1984 and is still functioning today. And this company embraces the possibility of digital type, which is the first time we're seeing that. So we're going to get experimental typefaces like Matrix and Triplex, which we'll see in a second. And their work reflects the aesthetics and the technical potential of early graphic design tools. When everything was getting digitized, that meant our typefaces needed to be digitized also. So we have a lot of people at the forefront of that, and Emigre is one of them. And this is Matrix 2, which is a redesign of the original Matrix, but it gives you the same sort of feel to it. And then just so you can see how the hierarchies work within all of that. And I put the source there so you could go look it up. And this is a functioning type foundry. You could go buy these typefaces right now. Triplex, same thing. I have the source there so you can go look up the full type specimen, but this just gives you a sample of it. But what's nice with the digital, again, you can be a little bit more experimental with it versus what we were seeing, say, with the Swiss and the Universal type, where it was just formulaic, efficient, and sort of corporate in feel. What happens then if you start playing with it? So postmodern type, again, we're expanding the boundaries of what exactly type could be. I mean, it could be image as well as written communication. It's embracing those imperfections and it's allowing for individuality. And what's great with this is it's going to allow for designers to use type as an artistic medium in its own right for the first time. So the digital, we started talking about it with Emigre, and this is going to evolve a little bit and push into the web typography because we also now are going to need responsive web design. So we need to figure out how to get our type from print to screens, and this is the late 20th century. Matthew Carter, again, you can hear him in the Helvetica movie. Two of his main ones is Verdana and Georgia. And this is Verdana on the right. You'll see Georgia in a second. And this is designed specifically for the digital screens. And what's interesting with these typefaces is they are prioritized legibility at low resolutions. Because remember, once upon a time, our screens weren't that great with the resolution. So we needed to make sure that they would work. And with Verdana, you have wide spacing, you have a nice large X height. And again, X height is based upon whatever height you've designated X, and you can see it echoed throughout your typeface. It's ideal for body text. And Georgia, which we'll see in a second, is going to be elegant and more traditional, and it's going to still be nice and easy to read on the screens. And this is Georgia, so that we can see that. Again, serif versus sans serif. And Helvetica Neue. So how do you update the 1950s Helvetica Neue? Helvetica Neue was the answer to that. And why we needed that is we needed a version of a Helvetica that had the flexibility, like we can see in this case, from the ultralight to the heavy bold black. And it's neutral. It's still neutral. It's really versatile, and it's a go-to choice, again, for corporate branding as well as web design. In the 2010s, we are introduced to the variable fonts. So this is going to allow for multiple styles and weights within one single font file. So we can see it here with Helvetica Neue. We have our ultralight all the way up again to heavy and black, etc. And this is great because it's going to allow for a more dynamic and responsive type for websites and mobile apps. So why does this era matter? This digital revolution is going to help make typography more accessible and adaptable, and it's also going to cater to the needs of an increasingly screen-based world. So these innovations, like we just saw with variable fonts, they're going to set the stage developments for what we're going to see in responsive design. Contemporary typography, where we're going to get a little bit more customization and personalization. So in the 21st century, type is a vital part of branding and as well personal expression. And these custom designed fonts, hand lettering, this is going to gain popularity as companies and individuals seek to stand out in a crowded digital landscape. So how do we make it humanized again? Tobias Frere-Jones creates Gotham typeface, and this is inspired by mid-century New York City signage. It's really clean, it's geometric, but it's also going to become synonymous with modernity, and we're going to see it used in the Hope poster in Obama's 2008 campaign, and this solidified it as a sort of status as a cultural icon as far as typefaces go. We're also going to see the hand lettering revival, and we talked about Jessica Hische previously in this unit, but again, she's bringing back the hand lettering into the spotlight, which is going to allow for custom type for branding, editorial projects, books, book covers, entertainment. And again, we're seeing that human personal touch in this era that is dominated by digital design. And this is just a sample of her book covers. Again, a little bit more whimsical, and a little bit more, free and expressive, and again, humanistic in style. Just so we can see it on different products. She also did the gift cards at Target. And like we were saying with our variable fonts, we're going to need them for our responsive typography. So how do we work across, multiple devices? Our responsive types are going to allow for the seamless integration into, our screen sizes, and we're going to make sure everything's legible and consistent. So why does this era matter? We're dealing with custom and responsive type that's going to help evolve the role of type in a world where individuality and tech is valued. So how do we get those two to work together? And where are we heading? So this is where AI is going to start coming into play, and we know it's still in this sort of infant stages of that, and generative design tools as well. So how are we going to be able to create typefaces that are more dynamic, more interactive, more personalized than ever before? Well, we're right there. We're not quite sure yet. This is where we're evolving into. We're also, though, right now seeing the resurgence of the handmade and the analog. And this is nice because we're sort of blending, digital and analog so that we have that sense of authenticity with a little bit of connection to whoever is using the design. And it's no longer just a design tool. Type is a storytelling medium. It can be a brand identity, and it's also an art form of itself. So whether in the form of hand-drawn letters or algorithmically generated fonts, the future of type is going to be as diverse and innovative as the past, and it'll be interesting to see where it heads.